We return now to our top story, and Donald Trump's attorneys appear to have confirmed one of the allegations in the special counsel's indictment. Trump is accused of asking his then Vice President, Mike Pence, to stop the election certification process, even allegedly telling Pence he's, quote, too honest when he rejected that idea. Attorney John Lauro provided more insight on those conversations just hours after Trump pleaded not guilty in a Washington, D.C. courthouse yesterday.
President Trump was getting advice from an esteemed constitutional scholar as to an array of options that he could take in light of the discrepancies and what was going on in 2020. Those discrepancies were well known, and they were being litigated. Professor Eastman laid out a series of options that were discussed with Vice President Pence. Vice President Pence disagreed on certain issues, but ultimately what President Trump said is, let's go with option D. Let's just halt, let's just pause the voting and allow the state legislatures to take one last look and make a determination as to whether or not the elections were handled fairly. That's constitutional law. That's not an issue of criminal activity.
Lauro also says that the Department of Justice is violating the Constitution by pushing for an earlier trial date, potentially as soon as this spring. Joining us now, congressional correspondent for the New York Times, Luke Broadwater, who has been following this investigation for months and months. And Luke, in your latest reporting, you take a look at the possible reasons why Special Counsel Jack Smith has not indicted any of the co-conspiracies in the matter. Media outlets have identified some of them, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, the like. One theory as to why Smith did not bring charges is that he's hoping they'll flip. A second is that he wants to prosecute Trump's case that much faster. Walk us through what could be going on here.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there are a number of considerations when a prosecutor brings an indictment and determines who to name and who to charge. And one of them always is that the defendant has to have a fair shot at a defense, right? That's paramount in the courts. But there's another political consideration on the table in terms of the timetable, and that is if Donald Trump wins and is elected president, he can essentially make this case go away. So this trial needs to wrap up within less than a year and a half. And one way to make it faster is to make it simpler. Make it about one person, not bog it down with a bunch of co-conspirators. And if you do name a bunch of different people and charge them, well, that creates more complications, slows the trial down more. And we know Donald Trump's #1 strategy in court is to delay, delay, delay. And in this case, delaying could actually mean that the case is dropped. So that's #1. The other, of course, as you mentioned, is the potential of putting the squeeze on some of these other co-conspirators who have not been named, have not been charged. We in the media know who they are. And then seeing if they will then provide more information in exchange for not being charged.
And we'll know more about the trial schedule at the end of the month, but there's certainly a prevailing theory that this one might go first next year, even before the classified documents case, which did, of course, ramp up earlier. So, Luke, earlier in the show, we played sound from a very angry Kevin McCarthy doing a lot of whataboutism about other, election protests. None of it was true. But I'm more curious as to what your latest reporting tells us as to how the House Republicans are going to respond to all of this. They're on recess now, that's sure, to be sure. But are they going to ramp up either A, the investigations to Hunter Biden, which we keep hearing the equivalencies about falsely, or do we think that McCarthy, after seemingly tapping the brakes on an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden, might start going full steam ahead?
Right. I think that both of those things are likely to happen. The investigation into Hunter Biden will continue to ramp up. We know that they have a number of his former business partners that they're demanding to interview. They believe that as much as they can keep Hunter Biden and allegations against Joe Biden, even if they're unverified, in the news, that it creates a situation where voters think, well, I don't know, both of these guys sound bad. Yeah, Trump's charged and he's indicted, but I hear these other allegations about Biden as well, and it becomes some sort of gray area in voters' minds. So they want to keep that going. And then Kevin McCarthy also has floated the idea of impeachment, and it does seem like there's increasingly a clamoring on the right for him to go forward with that after the August recess.
Congressional correspondent for the New York Times, Luke Broadwater, thank you for joining us this morning. We will definitely talk to you again soon.